Hey, what's up? It's Jesko again from AcousticsInsider.com, where I teach home studio acoustic treatment techniques for audio professionals, but without all the voodoo. And this is another YouTube comments knowledge bomb special in collaboration with HEDD Audio, as I'm about to wrap up this series of videos that I did in collaboration with HEDD Audio. I want to give you guys another YouTube knowledge bomb special just to answer some of the questions that popped up in the YouTube comments. As usual, I don't get the time to get in there and answer them directly, so I'm using this video to answer some of those questions and give back to some of you guys commenting under my videos. So just real quick before I get into the questions, if you want to watch the videos that I'm referencing in this video, have a look at the link in the card. And if you're in the market for a new speaker, perhaps a HEDD speaker, have a look at the link in the description. That's an affiliate link. If you buy through that link, you will support me in what I do with Acoustics Insider at no extra cost to you. And with that, let's jump into the first question. This one is by Tudor Avram. It's on the first video in a two-parter that I did on subwoofers. This is on which sub should you get that works best with your speakers. And Tudor asks, hey, you said the bigger subwoofer, the better. I would like you to support that with more arguments. A bigger subwoofer would translate lower frequency than a medium small subwoofer. But if my room is too small, the waves don't have enough space to fully expand. So I think the limitation for your subwoofer size is your room size. I would really like to hear your opinion on going for a dual subwoofer system rather than a mono subwoofer system, and the difference, if there is one, between a big surface subspeaker cone versus two smaller surface subspeaker cones. If the surface of the bigger is the same as the added surface of the two smaller ones, is there a difference in translating the sound? You could pair up this response with maybe referencing the subwoofer style on the HEDD tower mains. Thank you very much. So Tudor, good question. So first of all, there's a bunch of questions in here. The first one, a bigger subwoofer would translate low frequency than a medium small subwoofer, but in my room, the small waves don't have enough space to fully expand. So this isn't true. So that's, first of all, the first thing you have to understand. The size of the speaker is not limited by the room size. I did another video on that, which you can find in the videos that I posted. And so what happens basically when the wavelengths don't fit in the dimensions of the room is that you no longer get a problem of resonances. So wavelengths don't build room modes or standing waves in between the two surfaces. Instead, what happens is that the entire pressure in the room just rises. You can kind of imagine that, or imagine it as if you were, think of a dollhouse, okay? And if you put a big balloon in one of the rooms and you blow that up, you pump that up with air, then the overall pressure in that room, in that space, rises and will push against the outer boundaries of the room. And that's sort of what happens when the frequencies, the wavelengths don't fit inside the dimensions anymore, right? So this whole thing of waves not fitting in the room and therefore not being able to be played, it's simply not true. It's just that something else happens, and that is a general rise in pressure. So the next question you asked was my opinion on dual subwoofer systems. So basically what you have to understand about dual subwoofer systems is that they are much more complicated to set up, because in order to get the benefit of a dual subwoofer system, you need to set them up in the room in such a way that the main standing wave that gets created, in particular in the left to right axis, gets canceled out because of the symmetry of the two subwoofers in the room. So you're using part of the energy of the subwoofers to actually cancel out some of the room modes. But this only works when you get the symmetry right. So that depends on a few factors. Obviously, the placement of the subwoofers in the room, but also the response of the room, right? So this is something that really only works properly in symmetrical rooms. And that's why I don't really recommend dual subwoofers for home studios unless you are really dealing with a perfectly symmetrical room. And that includes the construction of the room, right? So even if, let's say, one wall is concrete and the other is drywall, you'll still get an asymmetric bass response because the walls don't react the same way, the same way. And so that you could still, I guess you could still make it work, but that would mean that you'd have to compensate for that asymmetry with the placement of the subwoofers. And at that point, things start getting very, very complicated. All right, so I always recommend stick to one subwoofer first, start with one subwoofer, get to know what that sounds like, or rather how to integrate just one subwoofer into your system properly first, so you understand the problem of getting crossover frequencies right, getting phase matching right, setting volumes right, all those things. And once you're comfortable with that, once you really mastered working with one subwoofer, then you can upgrade to a second subwoofer if your room permits. Okay, obviously leaving the cost of two subwoofers out of the question here. So that's why I recommend sticking to one subwoofer. And then the third question you asked is about the surface area. So having a sub with two smaller drivers versus one big one. So I don't really have much experience with that. I don't have any experience with that, to be frank. As far as I can tell, it's probably pretty much the same. Yeah. So this is mainly a question of surface area, and whether you divide that up into two drive units or you do it from one, it doesn't matter all that much as far as I understand. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of the subwoofer, a lot of the manufacturers moving towards speakers or sub speakers with multiple drivers, because it gives them more flexibility, and in the end it gives you the same amount of power, the same sound, I guess, right, from that unit. So good question, and I hope that answers what you asked. Moving on to the next one. On the same video, so again about which subwoofer you should get that works best with your speakers, Tim110 asks, what amount of money should I spend on the subwoofer compared to my monitors? Half as much, about the same, twice as much? I would say about the same amount as both together, right? I mean, ultimately, spend what you will, yeah. But I think as a sort of rough guideline, if you spend the same amount of money on your sub as you do on both your speakers, you're probably getting the right match, the right pairing, yeah. So I hope that's a good rule of thumb, or an easy enough rule of thumb to follow. Moving on to the next question. So this is by Noak Westerberg, and it is about the second video in the subwoofer series. So how to place your sub correctly in a home studio. And Noak asks, or says, thank you. I've always been skeptical about phase issues when placing subwoofers. I mean, at 80 Hertz, the wavelength is over 4 meters. So it would take a misplacement of over 2 meters to achieve a full phase shift in theory. Thoughts? Yeah, you're exactly right. And so let me just recommend an article by Merlin van Veen. I'm going to see if I can find it. If I can find it, I'll put it in the resource section. He has a very pragmatic approach about phase matching, which he describes in his phase wheel. And the point is that as the phase mismatch gets greater and greater, or starting with a perfect match, you have perfect summation, and then as the phase of the two signals drifts apart, I think you need something, I'd need to look it up exactly, but basically the cancellation is quite small at the beginning, and it really only starts becoming really bad at something like 120 degrees mismatch or something like that. I can't remember the exact number, but again, I'll see if I can find a link and post it in the resource section. What that basically means is that in practice, you don't need to get the phase match absolutely perfect. You need to get kind of in the ballpark. You need to get close enough. Obviously, if you can get it perfect, that's great. That's the ideal, but you don't need to worry too much about small mismatches. And with as you said, with an 80 Hertz wavelength, that's over 4 meters. So you need a discrepancy, a distance change or a mismatch in distance of about 2 meters to get 180 degrees phase shift between your speakers and your sub. Yeah. Now, you do have to remember that we're not just looking at the exact crossover frequency, right? So we need to look at the bandwidth around that frequency as well, because the cancellation can obviously only occur when the two signals are not just in phase or out of phase, but at the same volume. And as we move away from the exact crossover frequency, the volume difference will gradually increase. But you need something like, I can't remember exactly, but about, I think, 12 or 16 decibels of difference in order for that cancellation not to be an issue anymore. So as you move away from that 80 hertz towards lower frequencies and higher frequencies, we're still seeing potentially cancellation if the phase match isn't there, right? So we want to get close, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that makes it slightly easier for us to integrate a sub in a home studio, and also to match subwoofers that maybe aren't perfectly aligned with our system. But good question. So this next question is by Deepak A, and it's about the interview I did with Klaus Heinz on why speakers can sound so different when they measure the same. I enjoyed the discussion. The only questions which I had after listening to the discussion is, if the microphone cannot represent acoustic energy in a room, how do we expect loudspeakers to recreate it? That said, a recording studio uses a mic to record music later to be played back through speakers. Well, you're absolutely right. We do not expect loudspeakers to recreate it perfectly. Yeah, the sound we're getting from our speakers is artificial. It does not represent the actual sound event in the room at all. Yeah, and I think this is one of the very old and very fundamental discussions of music reproduction. Yeah, how can you get a representation of the music, especially when we're talking obviously recording or like classic recording techniques. Let's say we're recording an orchestra or just a kind of a band, and we're trying to recreate we're trying to recreate what that sounded like in the original venue. We can't. So how do we do that in a way that it still delivers the emotional response, the emotional journey, while not really being what it was in the first place? Yeah. So that's a discussion that is ongoing. I don't think will ever end. But you're right. Yeah, it's definitely a realization that we need to be aware of. We cannot actually represent the original sound event in any way as it was originally performed. We just can't. But good question. So moving on to the next question. This one is by Raymond van Lake, and it is on the speaker decoupling video. Why is it so hit and miss, and when to still do it? And Raymond asks, thanks for another insightful video. One option hasn't been mentioned, I think. Is mounting the speakers to the front wall a good idea? If mounted well, this solution might be better than using a stand, because especially the cheaper ones will also wobble. Just a thought. Yeah, obviously, if you are gonna set up your speakers, or your setup is right up against the wall, using wall mounts for your speakers is absolutely an option. The problem is still kind of the same. Yeah, we're still looking at vibration potentially being transmitted through that mount into the wall. In the end, it really doesn't make a difference. I personally still prefer to use stands because it gives us more flexibility to adjust the speaker position. You know, once those mounts are on the wall, even with kind of arms that you can move around, you're somewhat limited in what you can do. And I would definitely recommend, if you plan to use wall mounts for your speakers, to first experiment with the position to figure out exactly where the speakers need to go. And once you know exactly where they should be in order to give you that stereo image that you want, at that point you can then figure out the exact mounting option that works best for you. Yeah, and I don't see any massive benefit or negative towards just using wall mounts. Yeah, so sure, go for it. good question. And here's another one by Dodging Rain. So this is again on the speaker decoupling video. Based on these ideas, does this mean ISO pucks are worthless? No, just like all the other decoupling solutions, we just don't know how well they work. Yeah, so I wouldn't say ISO pucks are worthless. The point is we just don't know. Yeah, it's the whole point of the whole video. Yeah. So if you have them, keep using them, obviously. If you hear a difference, great. Good for you. Yeah, so my point stands. But good point, or good question. Okay, next question. This is by Eichhorn, I guess, on speaker decoupling again. Do you think increasing the mass of the speaker to counteract the energy of the drivers can be achieved by fixing the speaker rigidly to the stand shelf and those to the floor or wall, like putting mountable speakers on a massive wooden shelf affixed to a wall? I'm aware of the issues with reflections such a solution introduces, so I guess my assumption is, since the mass of such a system, speaker plus stand shelf plus floor wall, is much higher than that of the drivers, the wobble would practically be eliminated. Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, so remember that wobble is one thing to eliminate. The second part of this decoupling question is the actual decoupling, right? So with your solution now where everything is fixed together, there is no decoupling happening, so you potentially get a coupling problem. Yeah, so that's the whole issue here, is that either you do decoupling and then you get wobble, or you don't do decoupling and you don't get wobble, or you don't do decoupling and you don't get wobble, but you potentially have a coupling issue. Yeah, so you're absolutely right in saying that if you fix the speaker rigidly to the rest of the structure, you're increasing the mass to such an extent that it would resist the wobble, and that is the way it is properly done. But ideally, there is still some decoupling in there somewhere. Yeah, except that, like I said, the problem is, in terms of order of magnitude, is so small that in practice for a home studio, I think we can pretty much ignore it. So long story short, yeah, go for it. Okay. Next question, again on speaker decoupling. This is by Beach and Board Fan. Can you hang speakers from the ceiling instead of using floor stands? Yes, of course you can. But even through the mounting of the speakers to the ceiling, you still potentially get coupling. Yeah, so the benefit isn't automatically, or there isn't automatically a benefit to mounting or hanging the speakers off the ceiling. So again, floor stands. Yeah, we have to stop overthinking this problem. Just get your speakers on floor stands and be done with it. Yeah, there is no massive amount of improvement you can go beyond that until you've spent $100,000 on your studio. Okay? Yeah, so just get your speakers on stands and let's stop worrying about this. All right? But obviously, yes, you could hang your speakers from the ceiling. Okay, moving on. This one is by Chris Jacob. Again on speaker decoupling. What about ISO stands? The sub version says to let the subwoofer move or float corresponding to the driver movement. I seem to remember reading that as well now that you mention it. Yeah, I mean, once again, it proves the point that I'm making, which is that it doesn't really, their marketing doesn't really make sense. I'm not convinced because of these products, because that's not what we want. What we want is the opposite. Yeah, we don't want the subwoofer to move corresponding to the driver movement. I really don't understand why what the point is of them saying this is. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know what else to say. Yeah, that's the problem about all these decoupling solutions, is that we just don't really know if they work or not, and the marketing in many cases stinks. To be frank. But yeah, valid question. So next one by Kim Terkelsen, I guess. Sorry about that if I butchered your name. Again, on the Klaus Heinz interview on measuring speakers. Kim says, Jesko, it would really be great if you could provide some examples of music tracks recordings where a phase shift provides a clearly audible effect. A realistic phase shift could, for instance, come from a Linkwitz Riley fourth order crossover at 100 to 2 kilohertz. So basically, you can hear a clearly audible effect just about with any recording. Yeah, if you enable the phase linearizer, I think that's what you're referring to. You can hear that with any music. It'll be more obvious with music that is a pure recording in a venue. So there's no messing about happening with filters and stuff in the mixing process. As far as I understand, from what Klaus mentioned in the video, I haven't tested this myself because, to be frank, I don't need to. I can clearly hear it on my speakers. It's subtle, but it goes very deep. Yeah, so it affects a lot of different things. Yeah, so transients, clarity in the stereo image, just to mention two. So I don't really need to give you examples because you can hear this with just about any music. Yeah, so get yourself into a room with some head speakers with the linearizer, and then do the experiment yourself, and I'm sure you'll be able to hear it. Yeah, this isn't it's subtle, but it is clearly audible. Yeah, so I don't know why you need any special music tracks or recordings to hear this effect. Yeah. Moving on, this one is by Pekka Huovinen, sorry about that, on the headphones video. So how to get more consistent translation from mixing on headphones. So Pekka says, I've been thinking about the fit of headphones too. Like, I have to wear glasses and that might cause leakage in sound and maybe affect my bass response. How would you evaluate the effect of glasses with headphones? Well, just by basically putting on your headphones with glasses on and without. But you're exactly right. Yeah, so if you put your headphones on with your glasses on and the seal doesn't get created, especially with obviously with closed headphones, this is probably worse than with open-backed headphones. But that's the difference you'll get. Yeah, and just kind of do the test. Maybe you can also just pull out your glasses as you're wearing your headphones, just to see what happens in that instant where you remove the glasses. But the main problem is exactly that. The one you mentioned is that if you wear the glasses and the ear cups or the cups of the sound, the headphones don't form a proper seal, that you lose the bass response, or you lose some bass energy. Yeah, but yeah. So I think that's how to think about it. Good question. This next one is by Perry and Keisha Walker, also on the headphones video. What about the DT990s by Beyerdynamic? They are below $300, but used to be pricey back in the day. Okay, so this is referring to my comment on saying that you should invest at least $300 in a pair of headphones. So I used the DT990s for a long time, and they are good. There are better headphones out there. Yeah, that's all I can say. And personally, I wouldn't mix on them anymore. So my expectations of what a headphone can do are higher these days. And so I don't feel comfortable both in terms of how levels are represented in the DT990 and also the bass response. They sound comfortable, but I don't think they're that great for mixing. If you check out the DT880s Pro, there's one version of the DT880s that is meant for hi-fi listening, and I actually prefer that version to the Pro version. So that's the one I would probably look at right now if you're thinking about Beyerdynamic. I've tested some of the higher end models of Beyerdynamic. I wasn't convinced, unfortunately, which is literally unfortunate, because I really did enjoy working on the DT990s for the longest period of time, and I just wanted to upgrade, but it turns out that the upgrade didn't deliver what I expected. So yeah, there you go. I think that probably answers your question. Good question. Moving on to Blake Stadnick. Again on the headphones. This was an incredible, helpful video. Thank you. You're very welcome. On a slight side note, have you ever done a video series where you fully treat a whole room? If not, I would watch the heck out of that. I've been thinking about this for a long time, how I could put that together. There's in simple, or to keep it simple, it's very difficult to actually make that happen. First of all, obviously, I need to have a project where I can follow the procedure with a video camera. Yeah, so I need to have a customer who was willing for me to do that. The process of actually treating the room is very intense. It's very labor intensive. I personally can't oversee also filming the entire thing, so I need to get somebody else in to film it. It's usually a multi-day thing. There's iterations that happen, right? So it doesn't always just work directly out of the box. I have to kind of tweak things as I'm going through it. So it's hard to actually capture that in a way that then it makes sense in a video format. So it's difficult to do that, and obviously it's time intensive, and with that the price goes up, yeah, because obviously I'd have to pay somebody to film that. So I've been thinking about this, and if I ever get the opportunity where it makes sense to do that, I will definitely do that. For the time being, if you look at the playlists on my channel, I have these case studies where I go and through the treatment process that I did with customers in the past, and we just look at how that turned out and some of the kind of details of treating their rooms. That's the best I can offer you right now. I'm going to do more of those going forward because I think that they're very valuable and they're a lot of fun for me to do as well. So for now, I think that's the best I can offer. Once I have the opportunity to do a full treatment video, I'll obviously get that out to you. Just understand that it is quite hard to do, and that's probably one of the reasons why you don't see so many of those out there, or rather, the ones that you do see are mainly focused on like certain aspects of the studio. It never encompasses the entire project, right? So a lot of them focus on just the construction, right? They basically just do a kind of a vlog of the construction, but then you don't get like the detailed analysis of like with measurements and kind of subjective assessment of what actually happens. So that's why it is so hard, or that's the reason I haven't done that yet. Yeah, but good question. Here's one by Joost, again on headphones. Any suggestions that have really good value at around 300 euros? Maybe the S Company 650 opinions. Thanks for the video. Yes, go ahead. You're very welcome. I'm glad you're getting something out of it. Sure, S Company 650s, go for it. I really, really recommend, if you can, to go to a shop and just try them. Yeah, because trying headphones is a lot easier than trying speakers. Yeah, so if you get to go to one of the bigger kind of audio engineering shops and you just try a bunch of different headphones, I think you'll discover very, very quickly which ones you like and which ones you don't. I don't have a particular recommendation at this point. As I mentioned, I'm using the Shure SRH 1440s. I'm not even sure if they still sell those. There are the 1450s nowadays, but those I think are closed back or half closed. I really enjoy these. They sound amazing. They're a little bass shy. As I mentioned, I boost the low end with a low shelf in my RME sound card to get them in line with what my speakers are doing. But I totally trust them apart from that. Build quality is so-so. I've had these for I don't know how many years now. The headband is definitely starting to deteriorate and kind of dissolve into nothingness. I've changed some parts. So one of these plasticky pieces here broke at some point, but Shure basically just sent me a replacement for free, which is great. Yeah, so build quality is so-so, but support was great. Can I recommend them? Sure. Is it the only good headphone on the market? Definitely not. Yeah, so there are a bunch of other ones, but I really suggest you try them. Because again, the fit of the headphones on your head is really important. You need to be able to wear them for quite some time. So I'm hesitant to make other suggestions. I really recommend you just try different ones. And sure, the S Company 650s are a solid option, I'm sure. All right, final question here. This is by Herr Shield on the second subwoofer video. So how to place your sub correctly in a home studio. And Herr Shield says, in my home studio, I don't have a single fixed listening position due to jamming on different hardware synths. Well, that's awesome. It sounds like you're having a lot of fun in your studio. That's exactly what you should be doing. A major pain point for me is the very uneven bass response at different positions in the room. I'm sure it is. Given the subwoofer is mono, would I be able to get a more even bass response at different listening positions in the room since the two speakers wouldn't cancel each other out? I'm not entirely sure this question makes sense. I think I understand what you're saying, though. You're trying to understand, or you're trying to figure out how to get a more even bass response. So this is really hard to do, to be quite frank, especially in a home studio. If the room is asymmetrical, it's hard to do. You know, there are ways to get a more consistent bass response across a larger area. Yeah, so what you want to be looking at is to some extent what sound system designers are doing, but also, let me just get this book. You want to have a look at sound reproduction, loudspeakers in rooms by tool. So there's a very extensive description in there, an analysis and description on how to use multi-sub systems in order to get a consistent bass sound across a larger area. Just understand that his solution includes 4 subs. Yeah. So, and it's not easy to do in practice. Okay. So that is really the only way to get an even bass response in a small room across a larger area. And even then, it's probably not going to be perfect. You're probably not going to get an even bass response no matter where you are in the room. It is still somewhat limited. So this is just something we have to live with, unfortunately. Yeah, I would recommend to probably not focus on that too much. Get small speakers. Here's what I would recommend. I would recommend that you install small mono speakers at different locations in the room where your synths are located, so that you can get kind of a local sound bubble, very sort of a near field sound bubble from different speakers in the room that you can switch on and off depending on where you are, and that you only focus on getting the bass right at your mixing position. So you have a main mixing setup that is focused on getting the best sound that you can. So using the techniques that I teach, obviously finding your listening position, setting up your speakers properly, and then just get small speakers that focus on mids and highs, kind of typical mono speakers, small driver speakers, so that you can just jam away when you're at a synthesizer and then worry about the actual bass once you're in your mixing position. Yeah, that's probably the kind of the practical way to deal with this, because it's not really going to be possible for you to get an even bass response across the entire room unless you invest a lot of time and a lot of money. Yeah, so that's my recommendation. But I get your pain, and it's very real. So I understand, and yeah, that would be my recommendation. Good question. Okay, and that wraps up this YouTube comments knowledge bomb. Thanks again for watching. Just quickly before I let you go, there's going to be one more video in this collaboration with HEDD Audio before I go back to my regular material, my regular content here from my studio. But watch out for this, that one final video. I think is going to be an interesting one. And just quickly, if you're setting up a new studio, I want you to check out my free workshop, The Phantom Speaker Test, how to set up your speakers correctly, no matter what room you're in. You can sign up to that at the link in the description. This is my step-by-step process to get you started with your home studio. So if you're moving to a new room and you're kind of left at odds thinking about where to start, how to do the right thing first, where to place your setup, how to get the most out of your room and speakers, then I want you to follow this workshop, which will guide you through, first of all, finding your listening position, making sure your setup is facing the right wall, and also then setting up your speakers in order to get a soundstage, a stereo image like you're working on really good headphones. And I cover all the questions that typically pop up when we set up a new studio in kind of a spare bedroom, in an attic, in a basement, in these rooms that were never meant to be a studio. You always come across the kind of the typical problems that these rooms bring, and I cover all of those in this workshop. So again, if you're setting up a new studio, please sign up to my free workshop, The Phantom Speaker Test, how to set up your speakers correctly no matter what room you're in, at the link in the description. And with that, thanks for watching. Let's get back to learning to trust our ears and having fun making music in the studio. That's what it's all about after all. I'll see you in the next video.